Good morning. Unfortunately, it is raining in Washington, which is always a disaster, and the metro is broken, which is a worse disaster. So all of you get extra credit for coming to class. In addition to that, we are live streaming this event, and there is television, so those who couldn't make it personally will get to see it virtually. And what they will get to see is really quite special. I'm Jane Harmon. I'm the president and CEO of the Wilson Center, a wonderful job. I used to serve in the United States Congress with our first keynote speaker, Bill Richardson. He was bigger then. He's a streamlined version of his former self, who has held numerous important jobs for our country. Of course, I think one of the best things he ever did was to leave the House. And the reason I think that is that when he left the House, a seat on the House Intelligence Committee became vacant. And guess who got that seat? Me. And I served for 8 years on the House Intelligence Committee, which was a big focal point of my 17 years in the House. And if Bill hadn't left, that might not have happened. So thank you, Bill. He also, let's give him credit, was the U.S. Secretary of Energy, the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, and former governor of New Mexico, and along the way has spent quite a bit of time involved with Korea, and especially with North Korea, trying to help with hostages and so forth, and has not only become kind of a rock star in the region, but has had considerable success. And we are really pleased that he has agreed at the last minute to come and keynote this event. Some of you may know that former Senator Dick Lugar, another great friend of the Wilson Center, was to be here, but he had some emergency surgery last week and could not be here. Let me just make a few other general remarks before we hear from Bill. First, the Republic of Korea is in my heart for a number of reasons. Let me give you 3 of them. First, when I became the president and CEO of the Wilson Center in 2011, one of the early invitations was to come to Kyungnam University, where I met President Park, this President Park. And I was awarded an honorary degree. That is a really cool thing to get in Korea, especially if you get it at Kyungnam University. It was a beautiful event. I wore a cap and gown, there were flowers, there was a big speech and recognition, and I felt, and I've been back many times, that that is an enormously special place, and it is the driver of Korean reunification. And President Park, who was the negotiator, you'll hear more about this later, is in a wonderful place, and I think it is a great honor to Korea that he is the president of that university and does the work that he does. So that's on one level. Second, in my visit since, I've gotten to know another President Park. That one is Park Geun-hye, and she is an enormously impressive leader of her country. And we've met numbers of times, including when she came to Washington a few weeks ago. And what I admire about her is the combination of strength and warmth. That's a very difficult combination for a leader, especially a leader of a country in difficult times, and she displays it beautifully. And the third reason, of course, some of you already know this, is that I have a daughter-in-law who is Korean, married to my son, and they live in New York. And much more important than those two, they have a daughter named Sadie. So that makes me a, wait a minute, Sunyo Pabo, which means crazy grandmother, more or less, sort of. Yeah, Sunyo Pabo? Yes? Okay. And I have been there many times to visit my relatives, and it is just a great joy to see this beautiful little girl every time I go to New York, like tomorrow. On an institutional level, too, the relationship between Kyungnam University and the Wilson Center could not be closer, and we're thrilled to deepen the relationship with today's Global Forum. Today, we mark the 70th anniversary of the division of Korea. At Wilson, we pay close attention to the history behind the headlines, and that's why, with the support of Hyundai Motors and the Korea Foundation, we've launched our Center for Korean History and Public Policy. It's a unique resource, and we treasure it. Partnering with Kyungnam and the Ministry of Unification, we've translated and digitized vital archival documents about inter-Korean relations. As this President Park pointed out last week, you can't get to unification without a strong sense of history. Today, though, we're looking forward, and you will hear after Ambassador, Governor, Congressman Richardson speaks from President Park, who will give the second keynote. As I mentioned, he is the president of Kyungnam and a former Minister of Unification, as well as Assistant Minister of Unification, Hae-sung Chun, who will be here, who is here, who will deliver remarks and take questions on behalf of his government. So meanwhile, please welcome my predecessor on the House Intelligence Committee and a lot of other jobs, Congressman, Ambassador, Governor Bill Richardson.
Thank you.
What I got?
Thank you, Congresswoman Harman. And let me say that the Congresswoman built a very successful national security career as a Congresswoman. And both of us, she represented California, I represented New Mexico, had a fascination with intelligence issues, national security issues, and I'm honored to be here. I know it's last minute. You were expecting the handsome Senator Lugar, but instead you have me, and I am very pleased. The Wilson Center is one of our most important foreign policy discussion points, and I think you're all very lucky to have Congresswoman Harman at the helm. I'm going to address North Korea, the issues relating to North Korea. I'm all for unification. The ministers are here. I think it's a very important goal, but you have more expertise in that area. My expertise is 9 trips to North Korea, mostly successful trips, but not some as successful. And when I speak on North Korea, I want everybody to know I continue a very deep, abiding, positive relationship with my friends in South Korea. I know it's a sensitive issue, and sometimes, you know, there's a little nervousness when I make these trips in Seoul and South Korea. Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, used to be foreign minister, and I think he would shake a little bit every time I'd make one of my trips. But at the same time, I think this is a very propitious moment to talk about North Korea. I say that because in the United States, we have completed an agreement with Iran. And while I wasn't entirely supportive of the agreement, in the end, I think it makes sense to do it. I was concerned about some of the provisions relating to Iran's activities in international terrorism, Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, Israel. I think the nuclear side was well negotiated, but it's happened. And right now the jury is out on whether it's successful, especially with the negotiations in Syria. My point now is that there's one flashpoint left in the world. Well, there are many, but one serious one, a tinderbox in the Korean Peninsula. And I think it calls for engagement. And let me explain. We're in a situation when the new leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, we don't know anything about him really in the international community. We know he's young. We know he's studied in Switzerland. We know he's tempestuous. If you are his opponent, you're not going to be in very good shape. He seems to lack a leadership base, an unknown. So it's very careful. You have to be very careful how this situation is dealt with. In the old days, President Clinton, even President Bush, I'd go to North Korea and try to deal with the North Korean leadership. But it seems lately that with Kim Jong-un, he much prefers Dennis Rodman to me. That's supposed to be funny. I guess, Janie, it isn't too funny with this group, huh? But what I would like to talk about is the pros and the cons of engaging North Korea. And I'm very conscious of the time. I know you've got a lot of outstanding speakers. But several factors in last summer's flare-up are of special concern. This was the flare-up about a year ago between North and South. This was the first significant physical confrontation on Kim Jong-un's watch. And while his father and grandfather dealt with many crises, the young leader is still working, obviously, to consolidate his leadership internally and externally. And demonstrating toughness in rhetoric and actions might be his way to do so. But it carries the risk of escalating out of control. And South Korea's president assumed power only a couple of years ago with an undertone and intention of increased collaboration and engagement with the North. And recognizing this might be interpreted as a weakness both at home and abroad, might contribute to a perceived need by President Park to demonstrate toughness, which sometimes might lead to uncontrolled escalation. The good news is that both sides got together. I don't know who took the initiative, but that was positive that the temperature went down, the de-escalation happened, and there are no serious incidents other than abundant rhetoric. But the suspicion still remains. And I think South Korea, the government, handled this issue very well. And hopefully, if Kim Jong-un was at the helm, the de-escalation probably was a result of a view in North Korea that it was in their best interest to de-escalate. They don't want to face the U.S.-South Korean military exercises, the fact that the United States has a treaty. But I say to many Americans, why is the North Korean issue and this escalation issue important to the United States? It's important because we have a treaty relationship with South Korea, with Japan, because we have close to 50,000 American troops there, because North Korea has nuclear weapons, they have missiles. It's a tinderbox. And our alliances in Asia are critically important. So that's the American interest. Now, what is needed? I think what is needed is a regional or international mechanism that can facilitate de-escalation and provide a ladder for both governments to climb down from heightened rhetoric and tensions, which could be very dangerous. Left alone, the two governments might not be able to find a safe, face-saving path to prevent further escalation, even if both are interested in finding one. So what I'm calling for, what I think is needed, is the six-party talks need to be replaced by a new mechanism. I'm not saying you replace any of the players. Obviously, South Korea, Japan, China, the United States have to be major players. Russia, too, although, Russia seems to be a little inconsistent in its efforts to bring peace to anywhere. But I think we need a new mechanism. And this is where I think the United States and the international community need to lead. Meaningful engagement, and then I'll explain what I think meaningful engagement is key to this. When I was at the UN in my private capacity now through my foundation, I've been able to intervene and engage in difficult moments and successfully contribute to reducing tensions. And there are no magic tricks, but just honest, intense, and meaningful engagement. So I think with North Korea, this successful engagement in this case requires a multifaceted approach. First, I think it's important to bring some new international players into the effort. Beyond the United States, obviously, it's important to bring in the Chinese, who, despite having their own complicated relations with North Korea, carry some leverage and offer some ease to the North Koreans. It's important also to bring other Western powers into the effort, like Norway, like some in the European Union, who've been engaging meaningfully in the Koreas for years. Those governments that provide some kind of humanitarian assistance, that provide countries with assistance with food, fuel, rice, countries that are known, I believe, like Norway, like Sweden, like some in the European Union, Germany, to be participants in this effort. Secondly, engagement should include both multilateral and bilateral meetings with the rival governments. I think the key is going to be North and South Korea. I'm not saying that should be replaced. I think that's where the important decisions need to be made. Simply holding multi-party talks is not going to be enough. Different countries can have distinct roles in such engagement, offering reassurance and flexibility and paths to reduce tensions. Third, this complicated web of meetings and relations should be carefully coordinated by the international parties involved in order to make sure the effort as a whole points in a coherent direction. This can take shape of what is called an international contact group. Instead of calling it the six-party talks, let's talk about an international contact group, a model previously used in other conflict arenas around the world. A creative idea might be to bring in some countries that the United States has successfully negotiated with and other countries to reduce tensions that would give the North Koreans, here are some players that we've dealt with before. I'm talking about Cuba. They have a strong relationship. I know the Cubans don't have much leverage there. But I think not only will the North Koreans feel more comfortable with the Cuban presence in this effort, but this can also serve as another significant step forward in the American and Cuban relations, especially if it's the United States who invites the Cubans as partners. Look what's happening in Colombia. The Cubans are involved in a negotiation with the FARC, sponsored by largely Norway. The United States is supportive. There's a contact group. And there's movement there, ending, I won't say totally ending years of hostility, but what is needed here is new ideas. You know, I hate people to say, okay, this is a problem that can't be resolved. It can be resolved. And I think the last year of the Obama administration, another capstone in the legacy might be a reduction of tension. I'm not saying we're going to resolve or have immediate reunification, but a reduction of tension that leads to an agreement, perhaps like the Iranian agreement. I know there's been cheating before. I know. I was involved in many of those. But at least a framework for an agreement that involves give and take. In the global arena today, only the United States has the ability to convene and coordinate such an effort. And despite its extremely complicated and tenuous relations with North Korea, and the U.S.-North Korean relationship today is not good. In fact, I don't think we're talking to them at all. The United States remains the anchor around which parties will convene and engage. This will require political will in Washington and probably the appointment of a special envoy, which I will not do. I am not interested. I came here because I love Jane Harman and the Wilson Center. I'm not looking for a job. In fact, I'm doing very well as a private citizen. So, but I do think this is needed, a high-level special envoy. And kicking into gear such an engagement and creating an international contact group can establish a longer-term mechanism to mitigate risks of future crises. And if successful, it might even be the spark that reignites a multinational effort to resolve the long-standing issues of contention between North Korea and South Korea and the international community. Let me talk about bilateral engagement, and then I will be concluding. It is obvious that we see the world in radically different ways. We're talking about us and the North Koreans. Us is North, is South Korea, the United States, even the six-party countries. It is obvious that we see the world in radically different ways, and it will take courageous leadership to try to change the course of these relations. And it's important to recognize that the lack of direct dialogue is not helping us achieve our goals. I think we have to have direct dialogue. We have to start talking. Not talking makes people go into a shell, into isolation, into dangerous decisions. Dialogue is not an endorsement of or legitimization of your counterpart's position. Dialogue is talking. It is negotiating, but it's not endorsing another point of view. Rather, it's an exchange of arguments and ideas that help both sides better understand each other and identify opportunities. The United States takes issue with the conduct of North Korean regime with regards to its nuclear program, proliferation, and its violations of human rights. The diplomatic toolbox is robust and diversified. While sanctions are merited and are a legitimate tool, so is dialogue. The two are not mutually exclusive. So the initial objective of this engagement should be to halt the testing of nuclear devices, stop the launching of ballistic missiles, and prevent proliferation. North Korea needs to do that. For a bilateral engagement to work, one has to keep in mind several perspectives. First, saying that they're not interested in talks does not necessarily mean the North Koreans are not interested in engaging. In fact, I believe North Korea is interested, but wants the engagement to be on its own terms and acknowledging its status. The North Koreans are following, I know this, recent U.S. engagement strategy very closely in Myanmar, in Cuba, and now Iran. The engagement momentum itself should be used to spark conversation. Secondly, no individual wants to hear he or she is just like another. Neither do countries nor their leaders. A sure way to fail engagement with the North Koreans is to tell them that they're just like Iran. They're not. Different countries, different cultures, different history, different status, and different neighborhoods. Third, while we don't have to accept it, we do have to understand what is the narrative of North Korea. North Korean leadership believes the world looks to harm them and have some historic evidence to demonstrate that. They're not bluffing. This sentiment is for real. I felt that every time I've gone there. There's not much anyone can say or do to convince them otherwise. And as a result, they believe that their nuclear deterrence is essential for their survival and protection. So understanding this narrative with the South Koreans, you understand this. I'm not teaching you anything, but I think we have to get in a frame of mind that leads to some kind of serious engagement. And understanding this narrative can help us better assess what is possible and what is not in the near term with North Korea. As much as the United States and world powers would like to negotiate denuclearization with North Korea today, a more realistic initial objective is to halt testing of nuclear devices, stop the launching of ballistic missiles, and prevent proliferation. That should be a first step, not the last step. This allows the North Koreans to keep their sense of security and deterrence, increasing chances of an agreement that will be kept. Fourth, on their part, the North Koreans must acknowledge that the mistrust is mutual. Previous agreements have failed. Thus, any negotiated agreement will have to include significant inspection and enforcement mechanism. One of the problems with the 94 agreements was there were not significant inspections and enforcement. In the agreement with Iran, if you read it carefully through my friend and successor, Secretary of Energy Ernest Moniz, there is good enforcement and inspection from the IAEA. There still can be cheating, but I think it's going to be very, very hard to do. The 94 agreement didn't have those provisions, so there was cheating, and that has to be a lesson learned. Any negotiated agreement, this is going to be a hard pill for a proud leadership to accept, but it's the only way to have a sustainable agreement. There has to be inspection and enforcement. Fifth, building trust is very difficult, takes a lot of time, let alone so during an environment of crisis. And to that end, my center, my foundation, a Center for Global Engagement, has been engaging with Pyongyang on humanitarian assistance projects, wheelchairs. I mentioned I visited North Korea 9 times throughout my career. I've negotiated the release of prisoners, helped reduce tensions with the South. My center assisted with food supply to orphanages and children with disabilities. One of the most meaningful projects I've led has been the recovery of the remains of American servicemen missing in action. There were 7, and this was during the Bush administration. I went there to get the 7 remains, and the North Koreans were interested in this kind of recovery issue negotiation with the United States. Recovering and returning these remains had both an emotional and symbolic meaning to all parties involved. Renewing this program can be a great way to reignite engagement with Pyongyang. And I want to commend the government of South Korea for its efforts on family reunification. I think this is another vehicle that might lead to engagement. So, this momentum created by the renewed U.S. strategy and engagement with countries it previously isolated is important. The U.S. and the world powers should use this momentum that has just happened with Iran, with Cuba, to engage with Pyongyang, and do so smartly and pragmatically. I think the longer we wait, the more isolated the North Koreans might feel, and their reaction might be counterproductive to such dialogue. So what I've said is not easy to digest. I know there's skepticism, because you've been through it all. But I think what is required is boldness. And I think North Korea, we don't know whether they have a bold leader. I doubt it. South Korea has a bold leader. The United States has a bold president. What is needed is some kind of framework that leads to a reduction of tension and eventually leads to a significant denuclearization of North Korea. But it also means finding ways to deal with the plight of human rights in North Korea, humanitarian assistance, an economy that is shattered. But and I'll conclude with the Wilson Center. You know, perhaps this is a project for the Wilson Center that has had many positive and indirect initiatives around the world. It has the prestigious members, the panel members, the visitors, board members, Jane Harmon, which you should undertake. And I think with a wealth of support from many South Korean universities, President Park, South Korean NGOs, this can happen. I refuse to think that nothing can ever happen. Again, I'm not looking for a job. I've been to North Korea 9 times. I think that's enough. I'm doing other things in Myanmar and Cuba and with protecting wild horses in New Mexico. I'm working on many other issues. So this is something that maybe the best special envoy is Jane Harmon, and she's walking up here to tell me to leave. Thank you very much.
How great was that? Yeah, I think we need a Sunyo Pabo to reunite the Koreas. Seriously, Bill, that was an impressive and important address, and it will get attention here, and there are many people here who think that unification is a very critical objective, and President Park, whom I'm now going to introduce, told me that his wife, who was prominent in the Red Cross in the Republic of Korea, was one of the leaders of the recent family reunification effort. He's been to North Korea many times. She does not have family members there, am I right? But she was leading the delegation, the family reunification delegation, something we should all celebrate. So I'm going to let you leave. I know you have other things to do, but I'm now going to introduce President Park. And James, would you help Ambassador Richardson? Okay. Park JQ is my dear friend, and he is president of Kyungnam University and the University of North Korean Studies, which are both in the Republic of Korea. He also is presidential advisor on Korea unification affairs. Dr. Park is a former minister of Unification and chairman of the National Security Council for the Republic of Korea. In November 2009, he was awarded the Jacques Chirac Prize for Conflict Prevention in recognition of his 40-year devotion to maintaining peace on the Korean Peninsula. He was educated both in the United States and South Korea, got his BA and MA in the United States and his PhD from Kyunghee University in 1974 in Korea. Please welcome a wonderful man and a frequent visitor, in fact, an honorary member of the Wilson Center family, Dr. Park Jae-kyu.
You heard of President Jane Harman spoke good speech she made, and Governor Bill Richardson really made a excellent keynote speech. Today, my meeting was first, but many times through television, I listened to his stories after his visit to North Korea. Actually, before he made the keynote speech, I should make opening remarks. Then, since his busy schedule, I gave him chance to make a speech. So I have to correct many of my opening remarks. You understand? So even he left. I know Governor Bill Richardson has a heavy schedule, and President Jane Harman, as she said, a good friend. We are like brother and sisters. Also from Korean government, Assistant Minister Jeon Hae-sung came with us, and Korean Ambassador Sung Kim late he show up. He's my good friend, and distinguished participant, guest, and ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and welcome. I am honored to be with you for this year's Korea Global Forum 2015. As Jane Harman explained already, Gyeongnam University, together with its partner, the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholar, is pleased to be the organizer of this year's forum in Washington. Our two institutions enjoy excellent long-standing partner. I thank President Jane Harman for her great leadership in strengthening our partnerships over the years. The Korea Global Forum is an annual international forum hosted by the Ministry of Korean National Unification. It brings together government officials, scholars, and experts to promote the global awareness of the importance of the Korean unification and to share views and gather wisdom in that regard. Today's event is this year's third forum, following successful events held in Seoul and Brussels last June and October. This year marks 70 years of Korea's national division. Still, the national aspiration for unification has not been fulfilled. To fulfill that aspiration, inter-Korean relations must be transformed from confrontation to conciliation. On top of this, cooperation is and among concerned countries is also crucial. For the past 2 years, President Park Geun-hye has made effort through her trust-building process, but no tangible progress has been made yet because North Korea has not embraced this process. The most important task is getting Pyongyang back on the path of making right choices on the issues of weapons of mass destruction and human rights. North Korea needs to return to the negotiation table, stay engaged in dialogue, and honor its commitments. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un should follow the course of his father and grandfather, that is denuclearization of Korean Peninsula. Abandoning the country's nuclear weapons ambitions is the way he should go. If that is the case, countries involved in the sixth party talks are ready to cooperate with him for security guarantees and economic development. The Republic of Korea and the United States should work on their common strategic plan to make breakthrough in this political deadlock. Seoul and Washington should work on a two-track strategy. It should simultaneously pursue, first, resolving security issues, including North Korea's nuclear weapons and long-range missile development, and second, helping them improve their economic situation through cooperation and assistance. Based on shared values, South Korea and the United States have forged a strong alliance for more than 6 decades. Strengthening and modernizing the ROK-US alliance toward a global partnership will continue to be a priority as we remain committed to tackling the challenges we face. This task goes beyond the issues arising from the Korean Peninsula. The growing importance of China to the regional security and economy cast a top challenge to us. Our two allies have to work together to have China abide by international norms, thus making the region stable and peaceful to live in. The countries in the region wanted to introduce regional institutions that include both United States and China. We have many distinguished scholars and experts here today. Your views and suggestions on Korean unification, Northeast Asia's security landscape, and ROK-US alliance will help to illuminate our ways forward. Thank you for your attention.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm James Person. I spearhead our Korea programming here at the Wilson Center. I'd like to welcome you all to the Korea Global Forum and now invite to the stage the Assistant Minister of Unification, Mr. Hae-sung Chun. He was appointed to this position first in 2012, and he was reappointed in 2014 as the Minister. He was also the Minister for Unification Policy, where he oversaw and managed the entire process of discussing and setting major directions for unification policy. And he also liaises with important partners on policy toward North Korea. He joined the Ministry of Unification in 1987 and worked his way up, holding many senior level positions, including Assistant Minister for Inter-Korean Dialogue, spokesperson, Director General for Humanitarian Cooperation, Director for Policy Planning, and Director of Inter-Korean Dialogue Planning. Throughout his career in the ministry, he participated in or led ROK delegations for many rounds of inter-Korean talks, including working level preparatory discussions for inter-Korean ministerial meetings in 2013. Now he's agreed to, or he will be delivering some remarks from the minister, from Minister Hong, and then he has agreed to take some questions from the audience on ROK policy. So, Minister Chan, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Hae-sung Chun, Assistant Minister for Unification Policy, Ministry of Unification. Unfortunately, Minister Hong Yong-pyo could not come here to join us in person. Instead, he told me to send his remarks. Now, let me deliver his message. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the Korea Global Forum taking place at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars and attended by many Korean Peninsula experts. Let me thank President Jane Hammond of Woodrow Wilson Center, President Park Jae-gyu of Gyeongnam University, today's keynote speaker, His Excellency Bill Richardson, and everyone who are with us this morning. The Park Geun-hye administration has emphasized the role of global community, the ROK-US alliance in particular, in our effort for peace and unification of the Korean Peninsula. In the same context, I'm hopeful that today's seminar will broaden the global consensus of peaceful unification of Korea and continue to advance the coordination framework between Seoul and Washington. Distinguished guests, 2015 is a history year for Korea that marks the 70th anniversary of its liberation and the ensuing division of Peninsula. For the last 7 decades, the Republic of Korea achieved a miraculous growth thanks to the strong determination and the hard work of its people and the close cooperation of global community with the U.S. at the forefront. However, persistent division of Korean Peninsula hamper the common prosperity of Northeast Asia. Against this backdrop, it is tremendously important to strive to bring peace onto the peninsula and improve the inter-Korean relation to lay the groundwork for peaceful unification. And to this end, a close cooperation network with the international community is more than essential. Sustainable peace can come onto the Korean Peninsula only when a strong security posture is guaranteed, and efforts are made to encourage Pyongyang to become a responsible member of the global community to build peace together. That is why Park Geun-hye administration is working to strike a balance between security and engagement, and between inter-Korean dialogue and international cooperation. It is also strive to build solid trust, not only with Pyongyang, but also with its people and the entire world. Distinguished guests, along with the determination and the hard work of our people, I believe that the strong support and the trust of the world led us to emerge from the ashes of Korean War and accomplish economic growth while building a vibrant democracy. In our future effort for peaceful unification of Korea, support and cooperation of international community is indispensable. Above all, the world should speak in one concerted voice to urge Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear program and take the path of shared prosperity and peace with Seoul and its other neighbor. In the recent summit between President Park and Obama reaffirmed our common goal of DPRK denuclearization and promised to work in closer coordination toward peaceful unification of Korean Peninsula. On the basis of our alliance that is stronger than ever, our two countries reaffirmed the principle that Pyongyang should become a responsible member of the international community and join the rest of the world in the path to shared prosperity as outlined in the vision for peaceful unification of Korean Peninsula proposed by President Park. The alliance between Seoul and Washington is evolving. It is transitioned from a military partnership to an alliance based on a shared universal value. I am confident that our two countries will continue to work close together to advocate important cause in our future journey toward peaceful unification of Korea. Ladies and gentlemen, President Park and Obama issued a joint statement after their summit in October. Starting the two countries maintain robust deterrence against any action by North Korea that raise tension or violate the UN Security Council resolutions. But we remain open to dialogue to achieve our shared goal. I believe that all of you are on the same page. I hope that we can deliver this message to Pyongyang and help make North Korea a responsible global player through our discussion today. I also hope all of you are brought closer through today's event and able to work together not only for our alliance, but for peaceful unification of the Korean Peninsula and the future of East Asia as well. I am hopeful that Center for Korean History and Public Policy that opened in June inside the Woodrow Wilson Center will contribute to deepening the understanding of Americans about Korean issues by its in-depth studies on analysis. I'm deeply sorry that I'm not able to be with you in person. Please accept my best wishes for all of you. Thank you very much.
And as I noted, the assistant minister has kindly agreed to take some questions from the audience on ROK policy toward unification. So I'd like to open the floor then to questions, and I ask that you please wait for a mic and then identify yourself, please. Sorry, right up front here, actually.
Hi, I'm Jenny Park with the USA Journal. Let me talking about the before talking about the unifications, but I want to more talking about what is the Korean Peninsula meaning is. South Korea and North Korea is one Korea, but last month we have Japanese and South Korean defense minister talks, and they say Japanese ministers say the Japanese defense military go into the North Korea without any consultation with the South Korean government. But what does it mean is Japanese has any knowledge of is North Korea is our land. That means Korean Peninsula. We don't have any two Korea. So can you tell what the U.S. concept about this? What, it doesn't make any sense with any Japanese
No, I think
minister thing. Thank you very much.
관련해서 한반도의 영역의 정의에 대해서 좀 말씀해 주시면.
예, 뭐 굉장히 민감하고 또 가장 현안이 되는 문제를 질문해 주셨습니다. 사실 그 문제는 뭐 통일부 정책시장인 제가 뭐 직접 답변하기는 굉장히 좀 어려운 문제이기는 합니다.
Well, I think you have raised a very sensitive and recent issue surrounding the Korean Peninsula. In my capacity as a unification ministry official, it is a little bit difficult for me to directly touch this question.
잘 아시다시피 우리 대한민국 헌법에는 대한민국의 영토는 한반도 전역으로 명시가 돼 있습니다. 그러나 또 현실적으로 잘 아시다시피 현재 뭐 북한이 군사분계선 이북에 뭐 실체로 존재를 하고 있기 때문에 그 여러 가지 복잡한 문제가 있습니다. 그래서 방금 제기해주신 그런 뭐 자위대 또는 어떤 외국 군의 이 한반도와 관련된 그 활동과 관련해서는 사실 지금 관계부서에서도 여러 가지 우려 또 우리 헌법이 가지고 있는 정신에 기초하되 그러나 또 국제적인 관계 속에서의 여러 가지 우려 또 장래에 또 우리가 궁극적으로 또 통일을 이루어야 되는 그런 그 고려를 배경으로 해서 그런 문제는 우리가 충분히 검토하고 협의해서 또 원만하게 해결할 수 있을 것으로 저는 생각을 하고 있습니다.
As you know, the Korean Constitution of the Republic of Korea stipulates that the whole Korean Peninsula is the territory of the Republic of Korea, but in reality, it is true that North Korean regime is occupying the north part of the military demarcation line. So there are concerns in the different government ministries, and there are about this the possible entrance of the Japanese military troops or something. But we have to respect our constitutional spirit, but we also have to take into consideration the concerns of the international community, and we also have to remember that North Korea is a partner that we have to make one country together in the future. So we are in consultation between different government ministries and agencies, and I believe that we will be able to find an appropriate solution to deal with this question.
great. Thank you.
Jay Ru is my name. I'm a founder, president of One Korea Foundation, nascent NGO based in Washington D.C., starting a lot of projects now. Since President Park's unification will be a bonanza speech in January last year and Dresden speech following it, there has been a great deal of increase in interest in Korean issue. In Washington, D.C. alone, there have been many similar symposia and held, and we all appreciate that. But most of the academic discussions have always emphasized the importance of doing something about denuclearizing Korean Peninsula and somehow reduce the human rights atrocities we all anguish over. And then next step, we believe that there is no real solution to either problem of nuclear threats or human rights atrocities, but unification. But there has been very scant attention to unification per se. Usually conversation starts and ends on lamenting over how difficult situation is, and it doesn't lead to any further solution. And that's a general question. So what is Korean government doing to move the dialogue? Of course, we have to talk about nuclear threats and human rights, but the direction to unification, what is the strategy to move that consensus to that direction is question number one. And second question is one practical organizational change that has been instituted in Korean government is reporting directly to the president, is a preparation committee called the PCUP. How has this emergence of new organization changed anything in Korea today? What are some specific accomplishments what are some new visions that's been created as a result of this new entity that we have all long wanted to see? We want to see some practical steps.
이제 비핵화나 인권 관련 논의가 이렇게 되고 있는 상황에서 통일에 대한 전략이 정부의 전략이 무엇인지, 두 번째는 통준위가 생겨서 특별히 이제 바뀐 부분이 있는지, 어떤 변화가 있었는지.
네, 먼저 두 번째 질문부터 답변을 드리겠습니다. 작년 8월에 통준위가 출범을 해서 바로 지난주에도 여섯 대통령께서 직접 통준위 회의를 주재를 하셨습니다. 통준위라는 것은 민과 관이 협업을 하면서, 또 관도 통일부뿐만 아니라 여러 부처들이 협업을 하면서 다양한 분야의 통일 준비에 직접 나선다는 그런 중요한 의미가 있고, 그런 차원에서 또 아울러서 그런 내부적인 준비와 함께 국민들에게도 통일의 필요성, 또 통일을 준비를 해야 되는 그런 중요성에 대해서도 이렇게 공감대를 형성하면서, 또 아울러서 국제사회와의 그런 협력도 나서는 그런 역할을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 통준위가 나름대로 원래 출범했을 때 그런 목표를 달성하기 위해서 계속 노력을 하고 있다는 점을 말씀을 먼저 드리겠습니다.
So let me take your second question first. The Presidential Committee for Unification Preparation was launched August last year, and as recently as last Thursday, it had its plenary meeting chaired by President Park herself. The Presidential Committee for Unification Preparation is basically a public-private cooperation body, and it involves other government agencies as well as the Ministry of Unification to touch diverse issues in preparation for unification of the Korean Peninsula. One of its important roles to engage with the general public as well as the global community to build consensus about why unification of the Korean Peninsula is necessary and it is beneficial to us all. So I can say that the Presidential Committee for Unification Preparation is striving to achieve its goals set when it was established.
첫 번째 질문하신 거 관련해서 작년에 이제 대통령께서 통일 대박론을 말씀하시고 나서 일단 국내에서 통일에 대한 관심, 그리고 통일의 필요성, 그리고 통일에 대한 열망이 굉장히 많이 높아진 것으로 나오고 있습니다. 최근에 각종 언론들의 여론조사를 통해서도 통일의 필요성이나 또 통일이 가능하다라고 하는 그 수치가 80% 후반대까지 이르고 있습니다. 이것은 굉장히 실제로 통일을 이루는 데 있어서도 과거에 동소독의 경우도 그렇지만 정부 차원의 준비뿐만 아니라 국민들이 이 통일을 원하고 열망하는 것이 꼭 필요하다고 생각을 합니다.
To respond to your first question, after the bonanza analogy of President Park, surveys proved that the interest in unification has been raised and there are more discussions about why unification is necessary and beneficial. According to the recent surveys, almost 90% of the respondents responded that unification is possible and it should happen. So this passion and aspiration of the general public is very important as in our course of unification, as we witnessed in the German case.
아울러서 당면한 가장 큰 안보 위협이라고 할 수 있는 북한의 핵 문제 해결을 위한 대화를 포함해서 우리가 국제사회와의 긴밀한 공조를 통해서 핵이나 인권 문제와 같은 그런 어떤 당면한 현안을 해결하기 위한 그런 대화와 협력이 또 필요하고요. 동시에 남북 간에도 당연히 그런 문제들을 협의하고 또 남북이 가지고 있는 이산가족 문제라든가 여러 당면 현안들이 있습니다. 그래서 그런 문제를 풀어가기 위한 대화와 협력을 지속하면서, 그러나 다른 한편으로는 통일 준비와 관련된 내용들도 우리가 또 다른 채널로 계속 준비를 하고, 또 필요하다면 또 가능하다면 북한과 또 그런 문제를 협의할 수 있는 그런 체계를 갖추고 있습니다.
But we also believe that coordination with the international community is important to tackle pressing issues including the nuclear threat and human rights violation in North Korea. And there are also the inter-Korean issues like separated families. So we have to also pursue the inter-Korean dialogue with the Pyongyang regime. So we are going to continue to pursue the dialogue and cooperation project, but at the same time, we will also make preparations for unification in the future. So, and if necessary, we are also ready to talk about unification with North Korea, then we are striving to build this kind of framework to enable this kind of discussions.
Right. Right up front here.
Kenny Sawai, Global Peace Foundation. I have a question about Mongolia toward South Korea's unification towards Mongolia's policy. So Mongolia has bilateral relationship with North Korea and also South Korea, and also deregulation also realized, and also neighbor nation. Such a situation. So how you think the global policy towards unification, so the role of Mongolia nation?
북한과 다 외교 관계를 갖고 있는 몽골의 역할에 대해서 말씀해 주세요.
네, 아까 제가 장관의 축사를 읽으면서도 그런 내용이 있습니다만 한반도의 통일이라는 것이 물론 기본적으로는 남북이 주도를 하겠지만 결국은 통일에 이르는 과정 그리고 통일 이후의 통합 과정 모두 다 국제사회와의 긴밀한 협력 그리고 지원이 필요하다고 생각을 합니다. 그런 차원에서 기본적으로 미국이라든지 일본, 중국, 러시아 뿐만 아니라 몽골 같이 동북아의 그런 영내 국가들과의 긴밀한 협력 또 지원이 통일 과정과 그 이후에도 적극적으로 필요하다고 생각을 하기 때문에 그런 부분들은 또 지금도 여러 가지 다양한 채널 내지는 그런 레짐을 통해서 그런 협력이 이루어지는 것으로 알고 있습니다. 그런 것들이 좀 더 발전해서 나중에 한반도의 통일에도 그런 몽골을 포함한 그런 국제사회의 긴밀한 협력과 지원이 필요하다고 생각을 합니다.
As written in the Mr. Hong's remarks I read, of course, the unification process itself should be led by the two Koreas, but the support and cooperation of the other countries is very important in the course of unification and the integration after unification as well. So we also, of course, cherish our partnership with important stakeholders like the United States, Japan, China, and Russia, but other countries in the Northeast Asian region are also very important. So in that sense, Mongolia is very important. And there are already various channels of consultation with Mongolia to discuss bilateral and cooperation and discuss other diplomatic issues. I believe that we can develop these existing channels in a way that it can contribute to the future course of unification.
Great, thank you. I know the Assistant Minister has another schedule, but perhaps one more question? Okay.
My name is Tong Kim. I want to just ask you a very simple question. That is, the relationship between denuclearization of North Korea and the Korean goal of unification. It appears to anyone who is interested in the issue of unification that Korean government, led by President Park, is interested in talking about unification only after denuclearization is achieved. Now, that said, if that understanding is accurate, I want to go back to what Governor Bill Richardson made this morning. Whether it is the time in terms of inefficacy or futility of six-party talks, is it about time for South Korean government in consultation with you in Washington? And I thought I would ask Song Kim same question later. That is, Bill Richardson raised a question of whether we should think about what he called, well, it's not his term, it's very prevalent term in the world of international studies, what he called the International Contact Group, to replace the six-party, not the players, but the name of and nature of the contacts, and to include more players, such as Cuba, EU, Germany, and Sweden, Norway, and all these countries has something to do with helping North Korea in terms of humanitarian aid and so forth. And this way, that Pyongyang would probably feel more comfortable talking to this issue, because right now, both sides, by both sides I mean the North Korean on one side and the rest of the international community members on the other, and especially Washington and Seoul, imposing preconditions to talks or resumption of six-party talks, which will never happen because the North Koreans will never accept the conditions that they've been imposed upon anyway. Question is whether you would consider, as an official of the South Korean government, government's Ministry of Unification, that to study or ever discuss the possibility of replacing the current six-party format, which had not met since 2008, never met anything. They thought we still talking about the landmark statement, that's September 19th joint statement of the six-party talks, and we keep pressing North Korea to abide by its commitments in that statement and also UN Security Council resolutions. Now the thing is, North Korea has obligated its obligation. He delinked. The North Korea completely cut off. It's
The assistant minister has another.
okay.
You could get your
All right.
question.
So okay, let me stop there. But just ask you, what's your thought? Well, first, understanding of what Governor Bill Richardson said.
물론 그 관행 문제가 워낙 그 오랜 기간 끌어온 이슈고 지금 당장 그 해결의 어떤 뭐 가능성이 당장 보이지 않고 있기 때문에 여러 가지 뭐 가능성이라든지 뭐 다른 대안을 뭐 모색하는 것에 대해서는 뭐 저도 그 나름대로 타당성이 있다고 생각합니다. 그러나 지금 가장 중요한 것은 북한이 지금 현재 뭐 미국도 그렇고 또 우리와의 뭐 남북 대화도 그렇고 지금 우리가 조건 없이 대화를 통해서 문제를 해결하자라고 내민 손을 잡지 않고 있는 것이 가장 큰 문제라고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 여러 가지 뭐 다른 또 뭐 창의적인 대안을 모색하는 노력도 지속해야 되겠지만 북한이 지금 현재와 같은 그런 태도에서 벗어나서 그야말로 좀 진정성 있게 문제를 해결하는 그런 모습을 보이는 것이 현재로서는 가장 중요하고 필요하다고 생각합니다.
Well, the nuclear issues of North Korea have taken so much time of our time, and there has been no visible sign of solution. So it is natural and it is meaningful, I believe, to explore some alternatives as we discussed in the keynote speech. But the key problem is that the U.S. and South Korea is reaching out our hand to North Korea for unconditional dialogue, but the problem is that Pyongyang is not taking our hands. The key is that Pyongyang should change its attitude, and Pyongyang should show more sincerity to deal with the questions of nuclear issues and make some change.
Well, Assistant Minister Chun, I should have said welcome back to the center. It was in 2012 when you were last here, when we were working on a project we're continuing to work on, gathering and releasing documents on the history of inter-Korean relations. Great to see you again. Thank you very much for taking the time to deliver remarks from Minister Hong and for taking questions from the audience on ROK policy. And thank you also for the ministry's support for the Korea Global Forum. So thanks very much. We'll take just a few moments to set up for the first panel.